And yeah, just before we get started, I just want to thank you guys again for doing this, giving us your time to come here and talk to us. And also thanks to all the students that are here who RSVP'd, sent in questions. And yeah, I hope this is a productive meeting for everybody.
Yeah, so the goal of this panel is for students, UCI students, to get advice from professionals in the field. And hopefully our students have questions that they're prepared to ask the panelists. I know we had a couple that were sent in before this got started. But before we start, we're gonna have our panelists introduce themselves to the students. So they're going to say their name, their job, their education background, and then any fun facts about themselves. So why don't we go ahead? We can just start the way that we practiced.
Just like we rehearsed, huh?
Yep, there we go. All right, I guess that means I'm first. So I'm Phillip Richardson. My job is an anesthesiologist. I also do some administrative work, educational background, and did everything at UC Irvine, which makes it very local and convenient. Did undergrad in physics, decided to go to med school, so I had to get the bio degree while waiting. Did med school, did residency in anesthesia. After practicing for a while, got involved in management and helping lead teams. So then decided I didn't know anything about business, so got the MBA degree. And so yeah, been at UCI for a very long time. Fun fact, I was just saying that I've got a senior in college at Pepperdine who's going to join Procter & Gamble. He's very excited about that in business. And I have a sophomore who's down at Point Loma in San Diego who's hoping to become a vet because working on just humans is too limiting.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. I'm Tiffany Awischus. I graduated UC Irvine in 2010, part of the Physical Sciences Mentoring Program with a degree in chemistry. I kind of started my career unconventionally by going into construction. I thought with a chem degree would be pharmacy or cosmetics or something in that field. So I have been in construction for well over 10 years, had roles in both research and development, marketing, and I'm currently in sales. I am the market manager for Armstrong Flooring, and I drive specifications with commercial projects locally here. A fun fact about me, so my background photo, it looks like the Grand Canyon. It's actually the Grand Canyon of Hawaii in Kauai. It's called Waimea Canyon. My husband and I were celebrating our 13-year wedding anniversary with our daughter, Leilani. So that means I was married before I was legally allowed to drink. So fun fact there.
Tiffany is a great fun. I'm John Leyerle. I was in the first four-year graduating class from UC Irvine. I graduated in physics in 1972 when Chancellor Aldrich was the first chancellor at UC Irvine. And there were so few trees on the inner circle that most of us were taller than the trees. The campus looks a lot different now than it did in 1972 when I graduated. So I've been blessed over the course of my career to be involved in 4 different sectors for a decade or longer. I began in the private sector in land development, applying my degree in physics, community noise measurement and noise control. I shifted to the public sector, John Wayne Airport, spent 2 decades there, running the noise and access program, and then shifting to a leadership role in facilities for about a decade, and built the 3rd terminal at John Wayne Airport where Southwest Airlines principally works, about a $500 million project. It was a once in a career project, spectacular. And during all of that time, a reserve officer in the United States Coast Guard, I was in the last draft, a draft number of 7 when I was an undergrad at UC Irvine. And I wouldn't change a minute of the 38 years I spent in the US Coast Guard. It was a spectacular time. And then lastly, I'm now in my 4th career. I'm now working for a number of nonprofits, having as satisfying a time as I had in those other three sectors. And a fun fact about me is, while in the first 3 sectors, I focused on being good to earn a paycheck, now in the nonprofit sector, I'm doing my best to be good for nothing.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Mario Pulido. I graduated from UCI back in 2003 with a degree in chemistry. I then pursued a master's degree at Cal Poly Pomona in biochemistry, and I did my doctoral work at the Keck School of Medicine. at USC. I had training in immunology, genetics, cancer biology, and translational science. So I'm, looking forward to share my experiences as a grad student. And right now I'm working for SciEx. It's a global company, and we do analytical instruments, for example, to measure DNA and protein and DNA. So very exciting stuff right now with a lot of personalized medicines. Fun fact about me, recently I got a telescope. So I'm looking at the moon and the stars lately. So if this works out okay, I'm gonna invest in a bigger telescope, see how far I can see.
Wow. Get some time on the James Webb, why don't you?
Right.
All right, thank you so much for those introductions. So to our students, at any point, if you want to ask a question, feel free to either unmute yourself and ask, or you can put your questions in the chat and we will read them out loud for you. We did have one question that was sent in before the panel started, and it was asking if you guys had this experience of how did you handle prerequisites for medical schools and the courses for your major? So they're asking for what advice would you give to aspiring medical students who are not like biological science majors?
Well,
So
I
if
would say
anyone
that's a
wants to
good,
take that.
oh, I guess I can take it. So I think it's a good thing that you're not a bio major. I think you want to set yourself up to be a little bit unique and different, and you just take the prerequisites. I mean, everyone needs the same classes. You got to do your chemistry and your physics and biology, and just get it done and excel.
Okay, awesome. Did anyone else want to speak to that question?
I mean, sort of related to, because before I worked with undergrad students that wanted to go to med school, but no, I agree with Phil is that, make sure that you take only the courses that are needed, because a lot of times what happens, a lot of times students take a lot of courses that at the end, they don't need these courses, and they figure that they spend a lot of time or use, their time not wisely. So make sure you only take the courses that are needed. Don't overtake courses that really you don't need if medical school is your goal.
Yeah, awesome. Kind of going off of that, are there any particular courses in college that you feel students, you recommend that they should take if they are wanting to pursue a career in your field?
So I would offer a comment on that. And this course was one of serendipity. It wasn't a requirement, and I would say probably most of my peers did not take it. There was an assumption that we already were good, and that was a course in writing. I would say that key to success in every career path you will choose, among many things that we might cover today, one of the keys is good communication skills, both written communication skills and verbal communication skills. They are fundamental. That applies to just about everything that you will do professionally. So I would say seek out an opportunity to exercise good writing skills, and as much as you can, good verbal communication skills, which may or may not be in a formal bit of coursework, but certainly there's lots of opportunities.
I completely agree. I was chatting with a dean of neurosurgery one time and had some out at university and said, so what was the most important course you ever took? He was like, English. Critical, because you have to communicate. I mean, you can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't communicate it to your boss, your peers, Congress, it's not going to go anywhere. And I agree. It's you don't need to be completely well-rounded. You don't need to be the great orator and the great author. If you can communicate one way, it's nice to have a baseline in all the different ways to communicate. But we've all seen professors that just are phenomenal lecturers, but don't do great research, or they're the great researchers, but they're not the great teachers. So take what you can and excel where you can, but do recognize that being able to spread your ideas is really critical. I'd also encourage everyone just to take fun classes, whatever you're passionate about. Go find something fun to do and enjoy it.
Yeah, Yeah.
I mean, the one class that I would say I took in high school that I've probably applied more than any other class. Can any of you guess what it might be? Typing. I can touch type. I don't have to hunt and peck. And boy, my fingers flow my thoughts very, very well.
Yeah. I definitely, aside from writing, a communication class, I don't know. I know sometimes we had to take classes on the other side of campus. So anything that would help you be a better communicator. And on that side, I know there are like the 1-unit classes. I remember it was called, and I'm sure they don't have this anymore, but it's like, do you want to be a star was the name of the 1-unit class. But what that really taught was, it was more of a confidence builder. It taught me, it was the very first time as a freshman that I learned about vision boards. And I'm a big believer in vision boards. And even to this day, with my background, people have asked me, well, you must have an MBA or that's your experience. And I'm like, no, I've had multiple vision boards, not just individually for myself, but even as a couple with my husband, we've done, this exercise of, it's as simple as you write a check to yourself, right? So that one day it becomes, to fruition. And there have been a lot of, I think it started with The Secret was the name of the book, which is the power of positive thinking. And there's way more out there now. But that was a very influential class very early on that really stuck to me to this day.
A fun story with that. My wife wrote down her goals when she was about 20, and she somehow found it when, 20 years later, and she's like, oh, I accomplished all these things.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
Here's an epiphany that came to me from a career selection standpoint. The particular career that you get involved in certainly has something to do with your education, certainly. And it certainly has something to do with your interests, but also has a whole lot to do with where you're hired. And so it's a little bit of an adventure. Something that I learned in my career path, maybe about a decade in, was that what was important for me was having a mix of technical things that I could do and interaction with people that I could do. If I had only one or only the other, for me, it wouldn't have been nearly as satisfying or rewarding. So learning that ultimately about myself helped to make a lot of sense as I continued in my career path, in making choices and finding incredible satisfaction.
Great. I have another question that was sent in before. It is, knowing that what you guys know now after, being in your careers for however many years, looking back at your college selves, what advice would you give them?
Oh, I'll start. First thing, don't take yourself. I would tell this 20-year-old Tiffany not to take things so seriously. I think when you're in college, you just think everything needs to be a specific way. And it's because we're very, driven. You are at UCI. It is an accomplishment. You should be proud of that. It's super awesome that you're part of this really competitive group of people. But I took myself way too seriously. And then the second thing, I'm really big with yoga. Hot yoga. And so when you're in a 100-degree room for about 50 minutes and they ask you to plank for more than a minute, just know that everything is temporary, everything. So I've taken that lesson and wish I believed myself. I don't even know if I told my 20-year-old self that. Sometimes you have to go through that mental change and experience to really understand, some of those lessons.
Mario, I'm going to jump in unless you've got something.
No, go ahead. I'm listening.
So I completely agree with Tiffany. I would say, I would tell myself from where I sit now, it's all going to work out. It's going to work out really, really well because the fundamentals are there. The commitment, the hard work, the interest, the fascination. But I'll briefly share some insight I got from my sister-in-law, who got her doctorate from USC in Chinese history. a little sidebar on that. When with the year that Connie was awarded her doctorate, she said, "I'm not sure why I went for a doctorate in Chinese history. I think I picked the hardest thing I could pick." She's a real bright person. But the life lesson that Connie shared was from her own experience, which is there's lots that's happening that will happen in your 20s, but your 20s are a magic time. You can do lots of things in your 20s, which is typically after we finish certainly our undergrad and maybe our first level of grad school. And for some, maybe even your doctorate. Your 20s is a magic time. You can make mistakes, things that you think are mistakes, and still turn out just fine. She ended up getting a couple of masters and took a run at her doctorate a couple of times and didn't really complete it till her late 20s, or maybe it was her early 30s. And, you know, she became a professor and really loves life and has had a sterling career. So apply where you can and get engaged as early as the opportunities present themselves, but don't worry about it. It's going to be just fine.
John, just a quick comment, sort of maybe going into a different conversation, but it's related. And the thing is, a lot of us, you know, claim a major because it's required when we get into college. But, you know, some people have their major fixed and they forget to look around. On the other hand, you know, in college, they tell you this is where you're going to learn and explore opportunities. But then people never give a chance to explore opportunities. So looking back, you know, I was fixed into chemistry and math, but, you know, careers have changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And yes, you still need a major, but there are so many career paths now that were not there 10 years ago. So definitely I would give myself a chance to explore, you know, opportunities.
I heard a stat when I was in junior high that said, by the time I grow up to adulthood, something like 80 or 90% of the jobs that will then exist didn't exist when I was in junior high. So to your point, Mario, things are ever changing. Opportunities are dynamic. So I think there's general talents that you want to aspire to. We talked about communication skills. We talked about hard work and a variety of other things. Declaring some kind of a major and finishing, you know, in a path. But it's not going to be static. It's going to be very exciting.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I have another question. So when applying for jobs, how did you set yourself apart from others who wanted the same job?
Okay.
Just go ahead, Tiffany.
Yeah, I'll get started. So I finished, so you guys probably know Leyerle, been a lot of movies, released another member. Was really differentiating himself. So let's say if someone, and I know that this is true of myself, that, you know, there's normal like working hours and then there's a whole like 5 a.m. club. Am I still there? My internet's saying I'm unstable.
You're back.
Okay, awesome. So I want to say what differentiated myself is when people were resting, I was working, or I was getting more experience or learning new skills. So what really differentiated this day, I use it like you guys would do for a final. It's preparation. It's going in, understanding the company that you're interviewing for, or the position or a school that you're applying to, and doing that research, you know, basic, you know, skills that we would learn as an undergrad in terms of finals, I think really differentiated me. And then nowadays with LinkedIn, you can even research the people you're going to be interviewing. Sometimes they tell you, hey, you're going to be meeting with this person. And it's good to really look into them because that personable side, that human side is very, very important. And so those are really valuable things that really will help differentiate you instead of just focusing on, okay, I want the job. what kind of value do you bring to the company? What makes you unique? What fun hobbies do you have? Because they understand, look, you have a science degree, you're smart, but what else is usually what they're looking for.
And I'd also say that, when you're interviewing for a job, you have to remember that it's not just you asking for a job, but they need to be asking for you to work there. So, is it really a good fit for you? Is it that you want to be? And, don't ever kind of feel like you're so desperate that you'll take anything. Look for the place where you're going to have fun, where you're going to learn something. And the other thing I've kind of learned is that, your boss kind of makes or breaks you. If you have a boss that you don't get along with, you're not going to have opportunities. You're not going to an exciting thing. Whereas if you and your boss get along, they'll hand things to you. You'll have more freedom to develop that project, and you'll learn a lot more. So developing that relationship and learning how to kind of manage your boss is a critical skill that you kind of learn through life.
I would love to add to that. First, I would love to echo Tiffany's comment about hard work. I really think that Edison was right. As bright as he might have been, it really is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Work is a good thing. And I suppose we all know folks or have seen folks for whom work seemed allergic or they were off-put by it. But as you get into it, the satisfaction builds, the accomplishment builds, the rewards build. There's a whole lot of good stuff in doing work. A very capable and famous physicist named Richard Feynman, who I got the good fortune to see give a talk at UC Irvine in the Science Lecture Hall one particular day. He describes himself as a pretty average guy. I don't think he was average at all. He won the Nobel Prize in quantum electrodynamics. But he was, in his humility, he talked about really working hard. And that's how he came to accomplish much of what he accomplished. I'd love to add to that as well. One of the keys over the course of your career for landing jobs and growing your career is networking. Networking. And what that means is simply who you know. And maybe it's not somebody that you know in the organization. Maybe it's just a friend who refers you or who can give you some feedback. But build your relationships over time. That will be fundamental. I would say my very first job came from the UCI Career Placement Center. It was a 3-ring binder notebook. I flipped through pages and I got 2 offers. Every single job in all the rest of my careers really came as a result of people I knew, relationships I had cultivated.
Yeah, I think there was one study that I heard about during my MBA program where they said that having a very broad, shallow network was much better at finding jobs than having a deep, narrow network.
I also happen to, and I don't remember the exact reference, but a Harvard study on, so if there's a panel of multiple people and we're being interviewed, what is the single factor that is most likely to have that panel choose you over a competing person? Let's say people with kind of equal credentials. And that stat said that 70% of the choices are influenced by whether or not the panel members like the candidate. So likability, sociability, an interest in people that's genuine, that's not manufactured, makes a real difference, not only to start your career, but throughout your career.
No, that one I'm gonna clarify a little bit because, and I'll just tell you what I see from my end is, in the past when I've done interviews, not just for grad school, but all, as for jobs as well. Up front, I know that there are other people applying for the job, but I'm gonna be honest, in my background, I don't feel that I am competing with anybody because it's about me, right? So I come with a fresh mind and I tell people who I am, very honest, and I tell them what I've done in the past and how, what is my skill set. But I don't try to really say, who am I competing with? How many candidates you have on the list? Am I number 2 on your list? because then that would add more stress to me, to my, before I go to sleep, I'll be thinking, who's on top of the list, and I'll be, curious to find out, where these people come from. And so I find that more stressful. So to be honest, when I approach someone, either grad school or a job, it's about a personal relationship, like you said. Are they gonna like me for who I am? And that gives me a peace of mind, because they want to work with me, not so much they're trying to select from a list of 20 people. Yes, you can always fill a job with people, but your turnover is gonna be really bad, for whatever reasons. And we see it in companies all the time. Yes, you can fill your spot tomorrow. That's not a problem. The question is, do you hire the right individual for the team? And don't get me wrong, but positions that, really I have enjoyed working in the past is because, like you said, there was a connection with the person that was giving me an interview. But that connection was based on, work ethic, and it was based on scientific interest, and it was based on how you see that company moving forward.
I have another question that was sent in. The question asked, how has your field changed over the years that you've been a part of it? And what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 or even more years going forward within the field?
I guess I'll start. The biggest change that has happened especially with COVID, is this new hybrid work that exists. So in a hybrid work culture, there are still some organizations, and I think because they're unwilling to change, like if you talk to a contractor who's done the field for 30 years, they'll tell you they know everything and they're kind of set in their ways. There are some companies that understand this balance of family life, this hustle bustle. Right out of college, if someone said I needed to be in the office at 7, be there till whatever time, I would do it. Whereas now it's more about, finding that balance, almost not having set work hours. I guess it just depends on you're doing equipment and you're maintaining, then yes, you have to be in a specific place at a specific time. But within our industry, just in general with, inflation and labor shortages, there's a lot of people that they're, and they're trying to fill them quickly. So they're very specific about who they're looking for. So I am seeing that big change in the industry. Whereas before it's like, I think you used your binder example, John, about getting 2 offers. I had 3 job offers on the table at UCI in 2010. And now it's very difficult for those same people to say the same, because they're like, oh, we need, someone who's an undergrad who has experience doing equipment. And it's like, well, unless they did research, how are they going to really have that? So there is work and how we engage. And then I guess how companies are looking for people to fill those roles quickly.
I agree with Tiffany that change is always going to be here, and being flexible and adaptable. And if you look at you read a lot of biographies, you'll see that all these folks that are going to go write a biography, it's how do you change and pivot? It's maybe in the 50s you could join IBM and stay there your whole career, but very rare, and I think it's going to be even more rare in the future. I look at one of my friends who all he wanted to do was chemistry. I think he was a chemist for less than 5 years, and then he was in administration, and then it was computer science, and then it was rocket science, and you have to keep pivoting and changing. So I'm sure you've all heard the saying lifelong learning, and I think that's goes along with John's comments on the hard work. And there's a great book that touches on that called Peak. And it does all the research, and it's like, there are no savants out there. It all comes through hard work, and so just always, learning, being passionate, and doing stuff that you enjoy and that's fun. Another philosophy, it's actually kind of Japanese, that you need four things to kind of have a fulfilled life. You need to do something that you're good at. You need to do something that you enjoy. It needs to make money, and it needs to be productive for society. So interestingly enough, a classic business book found the same three things. They didn't talk about being good for society, but they found that the companies that were successful were, they enjoyed it, they made money, and they were good at it.
Those are great words of insight. Lifelong learning was the first thought that came to my mind as well. Let me add, from my 4 decades in 4 different sectors, some lived experience, that in the business world, whether it's the private sector, the public sector, the military sector, the nonprofit sector, or another sector, nothing lasts forever. And in the business world, forever, in my observation and talking to friends and associates, forever is 3 to 5 years. On average, about every 3 to 5 years, something significant from your perspective will change. Examples: you'll change companies, or you'll change bosses, or you'll stay at the same company with the same boss, but you'll change duties. I stayed at John Wayne Airport, and I went from a decade doing noise work to a decade leading the facilities group, building a $500 million terminal. So realizing that change is inevitable, lifelong learning is necessary, that people, the aspects of humankind really haven't changed much since the caveman days. So we still have passions and lots of other qualities. But I'd say, as you apply the hard work with the passion, if you're able to focus on aspiring to something beyond success, and I think we all probably began by assuming we would aspire to success, I would offer this target for you, which is going to invoke your passion, your energy, and all the rest will follow. Aspire beyond success to significance. Aspire to do something in each of those 3 to 5 year periods as you continue to pivot on. Aspire to do things which you find to be significant, worthwhile, meaningful. And that has a variety of flavors. And if you do that, everything else will take care of it, that Phillip mentioned in those 4 items of satisfaction.
No, from my end, yes, I agree. Change is always happening, but what I find, at least in our field, which is science and biotechnology, which, changes daily by the minute, always go back to basics. It's like, what is the goal? For me is, what is the hypothesis of this project? Is the data there? Do I believe the data? Is this meaningful data? And when you do that sort of reflection on your daily projects, it sort of brings you back, and it slows everything down, because, it's very easy to jump into conclusions. But, the job of a scientist, for example, is to make sure that, your technology is based on solid data. So, in that case, you have your control of saying, what, this project really, as much as you want it, you can launch it, but the data is not there. And I think when you're clear to people of, what is happening in the background, people can take a break and say, okay, maybe we need to slow down a little bit. But, always have a sense of control in your situation, whatever that means in your field.
All right, thank you for those responses. I have another question, and it's, what are skill sets that a person needs to advance in your type of career? And then how would you recommend that students help develop these skills?
I'll jump in. Teamwork. There are very, very few jobs where you just do it all by yourself. Inevitably, there's some construct of folks who you're going to work with directly and indirectly, and maybe even beyond that. So developing relationships, reliance, trust, and also your own individualism at the same time. You're not abandoning who you are and your individual contributions, your skill sets, but the ability to work in a team, I think, is fundamental. And frankly, we've all been practicing that since we first showed up in preschool. We've been surrounded by teams. We're surrounded by teams all the time. But to be consciously aware, to embrace the opportunity, and then to engage. And probably you will soon find yourself to be a team leader, because those are just, the qualities that many of you who are on this this panel, this virtual mentor workshop already have. And you'll continue to grow in your leadership roles from there.
Yeah, I'll add to John's comments, kind of using both Phil and Phil's experience and Mario's experience. So first, I would say from an MBA standpoint, I always recommend taking the Myers-Briggs test, understanding who you really are, because the reality is you are going to have your strengths and weaknesses. I'm just going to use myself. I have a chemistry background, but I know I was always good with people. I wanted to understand. Always as an extrovert, I love talking. So it kind of makes sense that I ended up in sales, even though it wasn't even in my mind. And then now my husband, on the other hand, he's more of an introvert, but understanding that we're both intuitive, it makes some of that decision making easier. So I always recommend, there's these, I think it's like free 16 personality tests online, to take that test. And the reality is you're going to change. Okay. So I remember when I got my first job, I was always told that, oh, you're a feeler. I don't know. I think my boss threw some that said, oh, you're like an artist. You're right here. And it didn't make sense to me. I think it was just because I was maybe more emotional. I didn't know how. Really, to the second point, to kind of Mario that I heard earlier, is confidence. That confidence that I have, Mario seemed to have it on the first interview that he had, so all power to you. I think that's a lot of learning and skills that, being aware that, yes, you may not have that experience, but we all are strengths, and knowing that. So being, confident. And if you don't know something, we can always learn it. If you think about it, if you can get a physics, engineering, chemistry, any of those degrees, what stops you from learning how to communicate with people or learning how to listen? And there's a lot of mentors, not just in, can learn a lot of these skills from. So I would say those two big things stand out is, understanding your Myers-Briggs personality test. And then, learning how to be confident and practicing. And sometimes, becomes real in certain situations. That may be something you need to do. And practicing in front of a mirror, like actresses do, I think really like you would prepare for a speech.
Tiffany, that's a great point. The other side of the token, which we haven't talked about, but, I hope some of the students bring it up, is, and you said it earlier, is we worry too much in college of being really, really good, right? Because we want to prepare for the next step. But in reality, that's not true. All of us, if we can comment on it, have had so many failures. But, the confidence that you talk about a lot of times comes from overcoming a failure. So, the time when you say, oh, I was successful here, the first time is horrible feeling, right? It's horrible. But then, you have a track record of, applies, jobs you apply to. And, it's true. For every 10 applications that you send out, maybe you get one interview. And maybe that interview doesn't turn out positive. But that's one way of looking at a job application. The other way is, like John was saying, is you have a referral. But again, to get a referral, first you have to connect with people. And like you said, introverts, it's challenging maybe to talk to people. So how do you develop that confidence of being rejected? And it's a lot of it is trial and error.
I will add to that. So this quote comes to mind, which is be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And it could be, this sounds really silly, and I forgot where I read this or if it was a post or a book, but it's doing, I mean, things that you normally like wouldn't do. Whether, I mean, this is a little obnoxious, but I think I read somewhere like, you know, if you're in a subway or in a bus station, you kind of just like sit closely to some, I mean, well, maybe not now because of COVID, but you know, you would sit closely, just something to engage, like start a conversation with a stranger, you know, things that you would normally not do. So a lot of times when I mentor, I ask students, you know, are you part of a club? And they're like, oh no, I haven't really been involved. I'm in, you know, grades, research. So then I always ask them, show up to the club and introduce yourself to like the first person you meet. And you'd be surprised, that's very difficult. But if you can do those like small little tasks or, you know, challenges, as you get kind of primed, these harder things in life, which I'm sure you guys can all speak when you become a parent, when you have children and you have family members that are older, you know, those difficulties are nothing compared to what we go through in college and that interview, you know, process. So yeah, definitely, you know, a lot there, and just yourself out, just do a little, something a little uncomfortable that you normally wouldn't do.
Let me segue on Tiffany's comments about building confidence and offer some specific practical insight in building confidence for your first professional interview and every interview thereafter. This is something that works. And there's a term of art that we apply in the Coast Guard for this particular thing. So I'm going to mention it so it'll stick for you, and then I'm going to explain it. The term of art, it's called a murder board, as in killing. It's a murder board. So let me tell you what a murder board is that builds confidence. There's two parts to this. You are preparing for an interview for XYZ position. So you have one or more friends that are willing to help you, and they care about you. So they're going to spend a half hour, 45 minutes helping you with preparing for this interview. As Tiffany mentioned, practicing in the mirror, this is sort of like that, only you're practicing with other people. So you sit, and if you can, make it a table arrangement, kind of like the panelists are going to tend to be on the other side of the table from where you sit. That's the typical interview arrangement, even if it's a Zoom call interview. And practice having your friends ask you questions. And we call it a murder board in the Coast Guard because we ask the questions in kind of a pointed way, a way that's meant to sort of maybe rile you a little bit. And so part of it is, you know, being cool and calm. And at another time, I'll share an example of how that worked for me serendipitously and led to my commissioning in the United States Coast Guard and 30 years service as ultimately a senior officer. But in addition to practicing that interview, here's a secret that I found is always true. So it's something that nobody told me, but I discovered, and I want you to know it early in your career path. If you sit down, especially with at least one other friend, and think about the job you're applying for, begin to think about the questions that they're likely to ask you. Now, they sent out some kind of a recruitment, and so you know kind of what that's about. And you know a little bit about the company. And if you, as Tiffany suggests, if you looked at LinkedIn and some other places, you maybe know a lot more than some of us may have known in the early days of our interview. But begin to, with your friend or a couple of friends, begin to write down the questions that you think the panel is likely to ask you. And here's the promise. Here's the magic. I'll bet you a nickel that you can come up with more than half, close to 2/3 of the questions they're likely to ask you. Because guess what? They're not any different than you are. It's the questions that you would ask if you were sitting on that interview side. I've been blessed to be on both sides of the table. I've been the candidate and I've been the panel or the panel leader. And let me just tell you, that always works. I look to my fellow panelists to affirm whether that's been true. Would that be true from your perspective?
Totally.
So imagine how confident you're going to be when 2/3 of the questions coming at you, you've already rehearsed in the murder board. It's like, wait a minute, were you already here? Well,
yeah, I mean, that's
true. Prepared.
I would say all through business. That's true for even preparing for it's really good to anticipate, what you think. And that just comes with the preparation portion. So that message, starts with the kind of leads all the way through and multiple, aspects of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I to expand on John's idea of the murder board. So companies all have boards, and the CEO has to go report to the board. Not only is it kind of the watchman to make sure that they're steering the company in the right direction, but they're there for advice and to help folks. And so one thought has been that, we all need our own boards. Most of us use, our spouse, our parents, but you can also make your own board of folks that you want to become. Someone who's in that company that you really want to work with. You could, form a group of folks and bounce ideas off of. Hey, I'm in this quandary right now. What's and share and learn from each other. And that's to learn vicariously is much less painful than to actually go through some pain and suffering when you get fired or something like that. So.
Mm-hmm. Philip mentioned earlier that your boss can make you or break you, and it's good if you can to have a good relationship with and to understand your boss. I found over the course of my various career opportunities that my success was rooted in always there being somebody in the course of my career path who was a mentor, an advisor, an advocate, a proponent, whatever label you'd like to use. There's somebody who was fundamental, who saw something in me and said, hey, I want to give you this opportunity. I want to help you in this area, or I want to give you this suggestion. So being aware of that, be open to and be looking for who that advocate, mentor, supporter is in your particular organization or your particular opportunity. And one thing you can do proactively to influence that is you can, as you get to know folks, you can choose your mentor. There's a dynamic that mentees, the person receiving the benefit of the mentor, mentees always choose their mentor. The mentor never chooses the mentee in life. So look around for the person that you aspire to or you think might be helpful to you. Ask them outright, would you be willing, Philip, to be my mentor in anesthesiology? And
people will say yes.
Philip may well feel the same as I do. It's one of the highest honors a human can receive.
No, I remember being an undergrad or just being younger and just going, oh, I couldn't possibly call Joe. How could I? Joe wouldn't want to talk to me. And then you get older in life, you're like, Joe's a human being, just like all of us. And most of us, you get to a point and you're like, you want to help people, and to be flattered that, oh, wow, someone thinks what I do is actually important and cool.
Yeah.
For sure, most of the sort of job descriptions we talked about are, private sector, but, John, if you can comment on it, but people that are going to the military or even academia, my understanding is that people have more sort of job security and can plan long term about their careers, and that's sort of a difference in, where people choose their careers forward. If you like the drill of changing every 3 to 5 years and meeting a new team, then yeah, you're a good fit for the private sector. Or maybe you can be your own entrepreneur, start your own business. But, a lot of people, when they go into academia, it's because they want to do research for the next 5-10 years. They don't get paid a lot. Sometimes they get, good pay, but they have the peace of mind of, working on their projects for the next 5-10 years. They get research grants in advance if they, partner up with a well-established professor, and, they have a career where they can publish, and then they can, talk about the results, and, that gives them a satisfaction. When you are in private sector, like you said, everything, it changes, by the minute. So it's just, different ways of, how you will see yourself in the next 5-10 years.
Mario, you make a good point that I think you can preferentially choose a sector if you're looking for rapid change as opposed to more stability over time as a typical aspect. But I would say that in my 38-year Coast Guard career, things changed a lot. And the dynamic of the commissioned force is there's a schedule in which you and your peers get considered for promotion. And the way the military works is you get considered once, and if you're not picked with your peers, and the pyramid is steep, there are fewer positions above than there are below. Once you're passed over the first time, you get looked at a second time. Once you're passed over the second time, even if you're a pretty good person, pretty good officer, you're out of the organization. So I would offer this additional comment. When I transitioned from the private sector, land development, which had lots of variability and such, and went to work for the County of Orange for John Wayne Airport. I think it was the second year I was working for the airport. The County of Orange did something that no county has ever done in the history of the United States of America. It declared a $1.7 billion bankruptcy. And I looked at my wife and I said, oh my God, I hope I didn't bring them bad luck. So the truth that a friend once said is, while there's perceived stability in one sector over another, and that might generally be true, there's no guarantees, and anything can change overnight.
Oh, thank you for clarifying, John.
Just
All right. We have like 6 more minutes left, so I just wanted to do like an ending summary question for you all. So what is one either big piece of advice or maybe piece of encouragement that you want to give our UCI students with us?
Say, speaking of the dean of the business school, with a great resignation, I think the opportunities are abundant for new grads. I think the folk coming out of college right now really can write their own ticket. There's such a huge labor shortage. You're in a wonderful position at the moment, so don't stress so much. But again, do the hard work, do what you love, really put yourself out there. But and, you know, everyone, you hear doom and gloom on the news, but honestly, for you guys coming out right now, it is a really opportune time.
I would say, you know, for students that can afford it, get an internship or get a lab experience, and that will be your eye-opening experience while you're in college.
I would offer that this is my 6th year being part of the UC Irvine Physical Science Undergraduate Mentoring Program. I just love it. And I think nearly every student that I've talked with is the first in their family to receive a college degree. So that kind of surprises me because I got my degree a long, long time ago. I thought maybe lots of folks were doing it now. So the fact that you are pursuing and about to complete a college degree at an institution that's the top 10 in the country, oh my goodness, according to Business News and World Report, positions you in such a special way to have lots and lots of opportunity. And the way that you capitalize on that opportunity is networking, networking, networking. Build relationships.
Yeah, and I would lastly add, you know, find your passion. I feel like this year I have mentees, amazing physics, astrophysics degrees, and I find out they have a passion for baking, or they have a passion for like software. So I always say, if you can create a project out of your passion, do it now. Like if you can't get that internship, you know, there's so many ways that we communicate now through social media, YouTube, you name it. But if you can get a way to almost like brand yourself, you'll be surprised. As an entrepreneur, you're going to put yourself in that different direction. I will say that my husband and I have a passion for coffee, to the point that even when we were in Hawaii last week, we brought beans, a grinder, and a Kalita. And I bring that up because last year during COVID, we started a passion project. We both have full-time jobs, but we started Noble Truth Coffee for fun as a passion. And you'd be surprised. I mean, that's part of maybe a long-term a diversified goal. I always believe you should have a diversification of finances. And I will probably add that last point, that no one really teaches you about money, I think, coming out of college. So to really understand that, learn about money, learn about investing and diversifying, and trying different types of businesses. And I think that will definitely help you, with some stability, some long-term planning. And even if you wanted to take a break to travel the world when we get to that point again, which I know will happen. So it'll be a new normal is what it's going to be. But yeah, I would definitely, passion and, finding your entrepreneurial spirit inside.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, our wonderful panelists. I hope that I'm sure our students learned a lot from you all. For our students, this recording will be posted on our PSUM website. So if you wanted to go back, look at this, maybe get inspired again, you can go back and check that out as well. So thank you so much for you all for coming. And yeah, that is all that we have for tonight. So
Thank you very
Right,
much.
guys.
What a pleasure.
Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you all. Thank you.